Good evening, everyone. Malcolm and Jenny.
Good evening.
We're here to talk about Dr. John McDougall. But before we do, whilst we're waiting for a few people to come online, we always forget. We wait till the end to mention our upcoming programs and we then forget to do it. So I'm just going to give a mention at the start that we've got an event coming up next weekend and we could still take a few extras. A lovely venue in Queenscliff running a weekend retreat with our former immersion partner from Anglesey days, Anita Ricky, and it'll be a fabulous weekend. So if anyone's interested, after this, I will definitely put a link in the comments. We're streaming to both YouTube and Facebook, and I'll be able to see if anyone asks us questions throughout. So we do hope that you'll ask us some questions about what we're talking about tonight. So, and thanks for letting us know you're watching. And we had this idea that we would talk about the simplicity of a plant-based diet, in particular, honouring the fact that it's 12 months since Dr. John McDougall passed, and it was a big shock for us then, and we actually did a live stream straight from the heart, wasn't it, on the day that we first heard the news. And if you missed that live stream a year ago, I'll put the link in the comments of this video. And we really talked then about, how we have been so fortunate to meet him several times. But one thing we didn't spend much time on, or if at all, was the impact he's had on us as practitioners. And I've actually did the Starch Solution Certificate, which was a small course that Dr. McDougall had run. I did that about 11, 12 years ago. And it really gave me the confidence to be helping people, steer them in the direction of eating a whole food plant-based diet, following largely his principles. And so we just wanted to sort of honour his legacy and chat about that tonight and talk about a starch-based diet. We've still got T-shirts from more than a decade ago. Do you want to take on from here? Yeah. I've already mentioned
All right.
the Queenscliff event. Do you want me to say anything more? Anyway, let's keep going. Yeah.
Yep. Dr. John McDougall was a pioneer and visionary on whose shoulders we stand. As also on his shoulders would be many others in the whole foods plant-based movement. I'd consider him like one of the foundational pillars of the whole foods plant-based movement. But with humility, he would describe himself as, or he did describe himself as, standing on the shoulders of those who went before him, including Dr. Nathan Pritikin, Dennis Burkett, Walter Kempner, and Lester Morrison, just to name a few. But we mustn't forget that it never was just the John McDougall program or the John McDougall book. It was always Mary and John McDougall. They were a team. John McDougall had a very in-depth knowledge of nutrition and health. He had an extensive library, of which Jenny got to see just parts of it when she gave him a little bit of help when he was digitalizing some of his library, and noted that many of the articles that had been scanned that were original, articles from journals, from earlier in his career, had all these little notes and underlining in them. Like, he didn't just have these articles; he actually studied the publications. But and I guess this led to, and initially I sort of sometimes used to think, oh, McDougall's a bit out there making that sort of statement. But I came to understand that if McDougall made some out there statement about health and nutrition, that, he could probably back it up with some, research articles that supported his position. Most of all, we valued Dr. McDougall's contribution to nutrition and health. We value his clinical experience, that is, of treating tens of thousands of patients and participants in his residential program, and actually seeing people get well. And I know, that some, particularly newcomers to the whole foods plant-based movement, are trying to be all very evidence-based, and it's like, review articles and randomized controlled trials. But we value highly that depth of clinical experience. If we're listening to different people's opinions on, one of the, some factor in nutrition and health, and we'd actually give more weight to someone like Dr. John McDougall with the extensive clinical experience than someone who just, quotes a few, vaguely related randomized controlled trials done on people who are on the Western diet anyway. Dr. McDougall also understood the general principle of keeping the message simple, the nutrition message, because he observed that when the nutrition message was presented in a simple way, that his patients, participants in his programs, would be more likely to adhere to it and to get well. And it's interesting that sort of this came back to me today when I started listening to an audible book called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. And I thought of McDougall when B.J. and how McDougall was ahead of his time when B.J. Fogg said, simplicity changes behavior. Anyway, at this point, I'll hand over to Jenny to just talk a little bit about the simplicity of the McDougall dietary approach.
So many of you will know him well for saying it's about the starches. And so here we are wearing our starchable t-shirts. And sometimes there are people who criticize that focus on starches as though that's all that he was talking about people eating. I think one of the easiest ways to get to know what his very clear message was is to look at his colour picture book, which he made available free online, and it also featured, we forgot to bring it in.
I'll go and
He's
get
going to go and get it. He's in a publication that he did in, I think, 2016, The Healthiest Diet on the Planet. He actually had the colour picture book as an insert in the middle of the book. And in the colour picture book, it was using the traffic light system, which is pretty easy to understand, green light, yellow light and red light. And I'm sorry, we should have had this book right here on the desk, and Malcolm's run off to look for it because I was going to hold it up. And so I don't know how it's going to look in here, but it's like, his system, what he did, and our little insight into the development of this book was that it was in a trip we'd said last year when we did our live stream, we'd had the benefit of going on several, obviously, adventure holidays. And it was in an adventure holiday in, I'm going to say in Hawaii. No, it was in Costa Rica that he was, saying he was never going to write another book. But he had a publisher at him to write one, and he thought, well, if I'm going to write another book, I just want to publish the colour picture book. And so he put it inside this book, The Healthiest Diet on the Planet, and it's sort of in glossy in the centre. But it's his clear thing with red light means don't eat, and then green light is eat lots of these, and then yellow light is be cautious. And so it's very clear. But how do the starches relate to this? So if we don't have starches on our plate pretty much with every meal, we run the risk of not eating enough calories unless we want to load up our meals with very high fat foods, such as, if we're talking whole foods, nuts and seeds. And we so often, when we're working with people, we look at food diaries, or someone says, oh, I eat porridge for breakfast, but it doesn't sustain me. And we say, well, how much are you putting in? How much is in there? And they say, oh, a third of a cup, or maybe half a cup.
Quarter of a cup.
Quarter of a cup. And we just say, well, it's not enough calories, because it's, in the case of breakfast, it's those oats. They're the starches. That's the starchy part of the meal. And yes, it's very healthy to have, berries and fruit, and which, McDougall was a great advocate of. And I'm not sure people always understood that, because we'd eaten from the buffet on numerous occasions. I'd been to 2 of his conference weekends. He called it Advanced Study Weekend, where you eat from the buffet all weekend. And I've been to 3 adventure holidays, and there's always fruit and vegetable, but starches are the key. And we think that's a really important message. You wanted me to show something else in here, did you?
Yeah, you're just about the eat lots of them.
Oh yeah, it was the way he'd said with the green light images. I'm just going to make a noise with the. There we go. Eat lots of. Here we go. So that was just the way he presented his book. So whether it was oats, pancakes made from whole wheat, buckwheat, whatever, and so on. And how we incorporate that into our teaching is that when we're talking to people about what to eat and how do we eat. So when we're planning a meal, such as the evening meal, it's what's going to be the starches in our meal, and we build it around the starch. And we tell people, particularly those new to whole food plant-based eating, that in the past someone might have thought, oh, what meat are we going to have, the lamb or the fish, and whereas for us it's around, are we going to have what legume, what grain, are we going to have some potatoes, sweet potato. So we build a meal around the starch. And we make sure that we have enough. I mean, I love eating a lot of, low calorie density veggies, whether steamed or in salads. But if I ate too many of those, I wouldn't get enough calories for my energy needs. So it's the calories come from the starchy foods. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, and people, in this anti-carb environment, out there in mainstream, they say, oh, eat good carbs, you eat whole grains, but not too much, which is totally the wrong message. Interestingly, you might be interested that these starches also provide most of our other nutrients, like our other macros, for example, with things like wheat and oats, easily meeting our daily protein requirement, but being predominantly starch. Most legumes, other than soy and peanuts, are also, well and truly exceed our protein needs, but most of the macros in them are also starch. The potato, is starch, but it will also meet your protein needs. One little bit of an issue with, I think, misinterpretation of McDougall's teaching is he wanted to make it simple, as I said, that make it doable. And so people often quote him when he says, white rice, if that's what it takes for me to get you to eat a starch-based diet, then so be it white rice. He, in his coloured picture book, though, he makes it clear that it's whole grains. But he's taking a practical approach. The same with salt. He's not saying eat salty food. He's saying, look, if it takes a little bit of saltiness for your, salt accustomed taste to eat the starches, for example, to eat the potatoes, then just put a little bit of salt on at the end, at the table, so that the salt's on the outside, and you can eat the food. So he understood that it was important to get people to sort of get the absolute basics right when they're making the transition, even if that meant they sprinkled a little bit of salt on their potatoes and they ate white rice.
And just remembered with him developing the colour picture book, he wanted to be so simple that he test ran it with his grandson and wanted to make sure that, and I'm not sure what age your grandson was then, but he was quite young. Did he understand? Was the message clear? It was that important to him. Because if people don't eat enough calories eating this way, if you are loading up on salads and eating very small portions of your grains, legumes, potatoes, sweet potatoes, then you're actually not going to get enough for your energy needs. And down the track, potentially, if you're not eating enough, not meet all your nutrient needs. Now, that's something that we all say, if you eat whole food, plant-based, you eat enough calories, you'll meet your nutrient needs. And where people might not is, firstly, if they've got processed foods in there that have lost all their nutrients, such as oil, but also just eating too small a portion. And so the focus on the starch is really important, and it's certainly what we do. But, we don't only eat starches, do we?
No, my most basic plate model I can think of is a big bowl that's half starches. That might be, in the case of tonight's meal, that would be, the rice part of it, and the legume part, and the other half would be the the non-starchy vegetables.
So the other part of the keep it simple message is, and these are words that I've heard more from the people that work with his program, such as psychologist Doug Lisle and dietitian Jeff Novick. I've heard Doug Lisle say, don't major in minor things. People get so hung up on, do I need to eat this food for this nutrient? Or, I've heard this is really healthy. There's some science even that shows adding 10 prunes helps with osteoporosis, or whatever it was that the science said some years ago. And it's like, yes, they've done a clinical trial and shown that, but so is everything else you're eating going to contribute to your well-being. So just keep it simple and don't get too hung up on the complexity of nutrition. There's a really good question from Christine. What are the difference between wet and dry starches, and should we eat both? So a wet starch, McDougall, I don't recall him really using this language, though I do know that Doug Lisle does.
We use the term wet.
And that's where, let's take your grains such as rice or millet or buckwheat or even whole wheat, freekeh, that you've cooked up in water, and if you look at a packet, let's look at oats. If you look at a packet of oats, calorie density of dry oats is up near 400 calories per 100 grams, whereas oatmeal porridge is, depending on how thick or thin you have it, it could be well down around that 100 calories per 100 grams. So like a quarter or less of the calorie density. So the wet starches are more satiating, and this is important for, not overeating too many calories if you're someone who's trying to lose weight.
Or if you're someone who's trying to eat enough energy, then you might toss in some drier starches like our banana oat cookies, for example.
Yeah, so anyone who's at the other end of the scale, not trying to lose weight, but actually struggling to maintain weight, which does happen to people eating whole food plant-based. Maybe initially they want to lose weight, but then it keeps going, and they think, whoa.
Well, and they feel so good eating the whole foods plant-based that they start exercising more, burning more energy.
And so that's when we say focus more on some dry starches. So yeah, things like the banana oat cookies, the black bean brownies,
baked goods, baked grain goods,
or goods. Or you could even just come back to the sort of oatmeal example. I know some people that might have muesli, and muesli, of course, is not only just oats. Some brands come with nuts as well as dried fruit. But if you're someone that just splashes a bit of, plant milk or water on your muesli and then eats it straight away, it hasn't absorbed the liquid. So it's actually closer to a dry starch than a wet starch. And surprise, surprise, although it might be the same amount of oats that you could put, say, a cup of oats into water and make it into porridge, or a cup of oats close to it into muesli, but not soak it for long at all, then the muesli will be less satiating. So, the drier something is, the less it's absorbed, the higher in calorie density in general. So that's the main thing. And so, whether it's, and also flours. So if something's milled into a flour and then baked, it's a dry starch. If something is milled into a flour and then formed into pasta and then rehydrated in lots of water, as you do with pasta, then it's actually a wet starch. So hopefully that answers your question. I think the thing that we wanted to finish on in our little part, and we really welcome questions if anyone has any, is thinking about the passion that Dr. McDougall had. And I'm not sure how easy it is for people to read when we show this on the screen, but when we got a signed copy of his book, turn it around so I can read it. Jenny and Malcolm, good friend and fellow professionals, we will win. Now, he wrote that in September 2016 when that book first came out and we were at one of his events. We will win. And we looked at this book again tonight and thought, remember this and how positive we were? We're almost a decade on from that, and sometimes we struggle a bit.
Sometimes it seems like the eat more meat, low carb, sort of eat dairy, industry fueled movement is winning, but it's very,
particularly here in Australia.
But it's always McDougall actually used to say, they have the money.
We have the truth.
We have the truth. We will win.
So it's nice to be reminded of that, to think that eventually, surely, if we keep at it enough and help people make changes, try and spread the message in any way we can, that eventually the truth will win. So I'm sort of heartened by rereading that message and thinking, and I think that's what, when we first heard that he had passed away a year ago, it was like, who's going to be out there fighting these battles for us? So he's gone, and it's
but
up
his
to
legacy,
us.
though, his influenced so many of us that we're all out there, and McDougall lives on, and what he was trying to do lives on in so many of us. And I might add too that the McDougall program hasn't finished. Mary McDougall and his daughter Heather McDougall, and many years before Dr. John McDougall passed away, he recruited, what's his name?
Who are you thinking of? Oh, Dr. Anthony Lim,
as the new program director. And so the McDougall program is still going strong. It's remained a virtual program with a lot of online support for the since the pandemic, but the McDougall program lives on.
And it certainly lives on in our thinking. And it's not that we only take what he says, and because he's not here anymore and not writing about new things, we very much look into the literature ourselves, and we might not always have agreed with stuff that he said, but we're talking about really nuanced small things, and there's the broad message we absolutely agree with. And I'm just, there's so many things that are inside my head. Like, I can remember being at one of his events when it was a Q&A and people were asking questions, and someone had asked about, this is going back again, nearly 10 years ago, about, what about Parkinson's? I know someone, I have a relative, is this diet going to help? And he was really honest and said that back then there, wasn't any solid evidence But he said, you want to be as well as you can be under the circumstances. So even if you can't reverse or halt the progression of one disease, I've never forgotten that is like a reason to do this, regardless of whether, you know, the first thing that has troubled you with your health, you can't actually, you know, turn back the clock on. It's been a really important message. And I also remember hearing him once say, you know, I think in an interview when someone was, you know, who was asking him about, you know, something else, or how, you know, that question about how much do I have to do it in order to get well? And he said, how well do you want to be? With his beautiful smile. So that was, I loved hearing him. So we do miss him, and we're thinking of him on this anniversary of his passing. So anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's our short presentation for today, but we're happy to answer any related questions.
Or else we'll see you at our next live stream, whenever that might be. So as I said right at the start, we've got our weekend retreat in Queenscliff, Victoria coming up on Friday. And we have this wonderful old guest house to ourselves. So we'd love to have a few more people attend. If anyone's interested, please get in touch with us. And in our...
It's very much a hands-on weekend. And Anita Ricky will be not just doing cooking demonstrations, but she sets up a whole lot of, you know, burners on different tables and gets the groups
you have to cook for your supper,
to cook the meal. Yeah.
And we also have coming up in October our next 7-day immersion event. And you know, the last 2 years we've often, you know, been a bit concerned about the numbers, but we're blown away at the moment. We're sort of 2/3 full already, and it's still 4 months away. So again, if you've been thinking about coming to one of our immersions, maybe don't wait too long for this one. We might fill up. And thanks, Michelle. We came to that. We did the weekend retreat last October at Queenscliff, and so this is a repeat of that. And Michelle says that was fabulous, so thanks for that endorsement. Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll sign off for tonight. So thanks for following us. It says we had, I think, 20 people live just then, and yeah, so we thank you, Dr. McDougall, for all you did in this space and for the impact you've had on us. Okay.
Good night, starch of oars.
Good night.